Hey guys. Okay, so in this week's video, we're going to build on last week's video and we're going to do part 2 of my Singaporean social housing experience. Now, if you haven't seen last week's video, go back and watch it because it it does set the scene for what we're talking about here today. Now, those of you that have seen the video, or once you have seen the video, you'll know that I basically said I had 5 key wow moments or takeaways or things that stuck with me from that whole experience. So we talked through the first 2 last week, which was how their history, their super unique history, has really impacted or influenced how they've evolved as a city. We then talked about the fact or the impact that had on their housing stock. So the fact that 80% of their population lives in social housing, which in theory devalues over time, like totally different to the model and the way things operate here in Australia. Now, this week I want to cover off the last 3 points. The first one is the fact that Singapore is kind of like this textbook time warp when it comes to town planning. And then I want to focus on parking because again, they've got some really unique stuff going on there that's totally different to what we're doing here in Australia. And then I want to finish off by basically looking towards the future. So commenting on some of the observations or the things I heard, the rumblings that are at play there, and how that kind of correlates to Australia and more specifically Brisbane and what's happening here at the moment. And therefore where I think they're potentially going to go in the future. So let's start with this whole textbook time warp. What do I mean? Well, in town planning, and I alluded to this in last week's video, in town planning, there is a very heavy focus on learning from the past and constantly evolving and experimenting and all of that sort of stuff. Like, town planning is not a perfect science. So going through university, a lot of the course was focused on, okay, what's happened in the past, not only in Australia, but also over in Europe and areas like that, and what mistakes or negative outcomes, let's just say, did that achieve or did we see as a result of those things? And then how did we improve or how did we evolve from there? So yeah, when I turned up to Singapore, it was just like everything I learned in uni was playing out in front of me within a small 500-meter radius. It just blew my mind. And I've been reflecting on it and going, why is that? I think a big part of it is, my nose is itchy, not good time. Keep going, I'm going to push on. I think a big part of it is the fact that they evolved and changed at such a rapid pace. I think it also comes down to the fact that they took such a hard line and drastic approach when it came to evolution. So it was basically like, wipe the slate clean, let's start again, and within 50 years, let's totally change. So let's apply every modern town planning principle and just go, 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 go. Whereas here in Australia, and let's focus on Brisbane, things have more slowly evolved. I think also the fact that over there you have the industries driven by the government. Like, I think we worked out it was 90% of houses are built by the government over there. That's right, isn't it? 90%, 80%? I'm forgetting my numbers right now. Point is, a bucket load of the dwelling stock over there, unit dwelling stock, is built by the government and not by the private industry. So as a result, things can move at a much faster pace. They can really go hard in terms of applying the best principles and all of that sort of stuff. There's not external market influences like there are here in Australia. So anyway, what I found is we started at one location and we moved to the second location and the third location. Like I said, all within, let's say, 500 meters of each other. The first location was an estate or a complex that was done in, I think, the 1960s, the second 1980s, and the last one was the 2000s. So first one I turned up to, and I'm sitting there and I'm just looking at this building, and the first thing, and it sounds so sad that this is what I saw, but the first thing I noticed was the air conditioning units all over the apartment buildings, and the fact that they had the clotheslines hanging off the apartments, so you could see everyone's knickers everywhere. Like, it was hilarious. I might actually, when I go back and edit this video, I might put some photos in. So anyway, I was having a look at them and I'm like, Town Planning 101 in Brisbane, number one, you've got to screen your air conditioning units these days. Like, you're not allowed to have your aircon units in your facilities exposed like that because it's not visually the best thing. And then when it comes to clotheslines, like, good luck trying to find a body corporate that's not going to penalise you for that, because all the body corporates out there, especially the high rises in the fancy sort of city areas, everyone's big on you can't have anything hanging over your balconies, etc., etc. So this really grabbed me. Anyway, I had a chat to the chick and I said, look, that's what's jumping out at me. And she laughed. She goes, yeah, wait till we get to the next one. Sure enough, you progress to the second one and then the third one. And over time, you see these air conditioning units moving on the buildings. So first building we went to, it's very visible. It's right there in your face. Second one, it's tucked behind the balcony, so you don't necessarily see it. And so instead, unless you're in like a particular location. And the third one, good luck trying to find them. They're well and truly hidden. Similar sort of thing with clotheslines. They move from being outside on these poles to being in the balconies, etc., etc. So yeah, you got to see that, like I said, within 500 meters, that evolution. Next, floor plans. So she said back in the day what they did is, in the first building, they did very fixed 2-bedroom apartments. X number per floor, just cookie cutter style, because it was the most efficient way of getting more dwellings on a property. So they came up with the ideal unit layout and they just copied it en masse. Fast forward, they realized, hold on a sec, that doesn't quite, my face is so itchy today. I'm sitting here scratching everywhere. Anyway, point is that you fast forward and they start to mix and match floor plans. So they go 1 bedroom, some 3 bedrooms, some 2 bedrooms, all of that sort of stuff. And they implement this policy that basically says the ethnic mix within each complex or within each building has to match the national population. Let me get my words out. So I think it's 75% of the population's Chinese, and then the rest is broken down to Malay and Tamil. So basically whatever the national population is has to match what's in the building. And the reason being is they realize that over time, if you have the same type of unit and the same type of tenant all in together, it leads to a lot of social issues. However, if you have everyone mixing all different groups together, you build an understanding and awareness of other people. You start to appreciate how they work. It starts to break down fears of different cultures and all of that sort of stuff, which leads to a lot less social issues. Now I look at this and I was like, oh man, I learned a lot about this in town planning at university, because down in Sydney and Melbourne back in the 80s, they used to do these massive high-rise sort of complexes, high-rise for those days, high-rise complexes with the one social group in it. And it just became this little slum, and they had so many social issues, and it led to that whole poverty cycle just continuing on and on and on. So I was like, yeah, we learnt about these in textbooks, and here you can clearly see 1 building, 2 building, 3 building. There is the transition over time, yeah. Now, the next thing was the balconies. So in the first version, or the earlier versions, they had a lot of units all connecting to one single balcony or hallway, basically the stairs and all that sort of stuff. Over time, they realized, it's not such a good thing. We should probably limit the number of buildings that have access to each balcony, because the less people traveling them through them, the more private they are, the more people are going to take ownership of those spaces, and therefore the more they're going to care for them. So when you start to get to like the second evolution in the balconies, you start to see people have created these little gardens on their balconies because they're more private, personalized spaces. Whereas in the first one, it's just very bare and very cold. Now, the next thing I noticed was the commercial side of things. So in the first evolution of these buildings, the bottom level was all commercial. It was very open, like cafeteria style. You could transition through it in and out. It was very welcoming. However, you get to the last apartment building and it was very closed off. Like suddenly modern facilities have taken over. They've got air conditioning units and all of that sort of stuff. So it's very closed off to the outside world because everyone wants to sit in comfort. It was interesting because I sat there and I went, in theory, town planning is supposed to make things better over time. But this is one of those things where I went, I don't actually think it's made it better. Yes, it's more comfortable to sit in there. I'm not going to deny it. It was stinking hot outside, but it wasn't welcoming. Like the first one, I actually wanted to sit down and sort of take in the environment and all of that sort of stuff. The last one didn't even walk inside because it was so cold and off-putting. And yeah, they kind of flowed on into the whole general vibe of these complexes. Like the first and the second one, there was lots of people mingling around. There was community gardens, all this sort of stuff. But when you got to the last one, it was dark corridors, clean, a little bit sterile. It didn't have those warm sort of vibes. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then I started to go, okay, if we start to think to the future, I wonder what the next evolution is going to be. Are people going to pick up on those cold, sterile vibes and try to take it to the next level? Like, give them credit. The 2000s building, they had a lot of community spaces in terms of community rooms, sports facilities. They had these weird little kiosk machines you could go up to and audio classes for your children. Like, I want a 10-pack of Taekwondo this week. So they had tried to input that whole warm community vibe, but it wasn't quite getting there. So yeah, when I think to the future, I'm like, I think that's where the next evolution is going to go. Now, like last week, I wrote a little post-it note of things as I ran out the door to my meeting because I was like, there's so much stuff here. I want to make sure I get through it all. So let me just consult with my post-it note. We've talked about the aircon, the clotheslines, the floor plan mix, the balcony spaces, the commercial downstairs, the bomb shelters. Oh, this was so weird. So the chick I was going around with, she actually lived in one of the second evolution apartments. So the ones that were built in like the 1980s. And she saw how much I was geeking out on this stuff and how much I was nerding out. And she was like, do you want to come up and see my apartment? And I was like, oh, yes, please take me up. I'm dying to see this. So I was surprised. They were actually quite big inside. Anyway, went inside. We were just about to go out, finish the little tour. And she goes, oh, by the way, what's this? And she opens this secret hidden door under the stairs. And I was like, oh, I didn't even notice that was there. I opened it up and she goes, what is it? And I'm like, storage room. Like, door's a bit heavy and weird, but storage, I guess. She goes, bomb shelter. And I was like, what? Apparently every single unit is built with a bomb shelter because they want to make sure that they're future-proofing and accounting for any political issues that could arise in the future. Now, I thought this was really interesting because I was talking to my mum about this on the weekend, recapping my whole holiday, and she goes, oh, apparently, and I haven't fact-checked this, but apparently the road access from the airport into the main city is designed so that they can pick up all the pot plants, move them aside, and all of a sudden it's an extra runway strip for a war scenario. So I was like, damn, they've considered future-proofing. Maybe there were some political issues and international issues going on at the time when these houses were built or these dwellings were built. Interesting to see the influence that it's had, like this heavy grade bomb shelter in this apartment. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, like I said, it's kind of one of those things where I just found it so interesting that I could stand within the one space and I could just look around and see 3 different examples of how town planning has evolved and all that sort of stuff through the textbooks. Oh, my face is so itchy today. I hope I'm not having an allergic reaction. Anyway, you can see how things have just so clearly evolved over time, and they're things that I had learned about within the textbooks when I was at uni, so that just really grabbed me. Now, let's move on to parking. So, parking. These units, these social housing units that are created, do not come with parking. There is no car parking bays associated with them. Government is really, really trying to discourage private car usage. So, like I said, they don't tell them government controls these units, they create these units, so they make sure that they don't actually create them with car parks. You also need to bid for one of the limited car licenses that are available each year. If you're successful in your bidding, you then need to pay $100,000 for a 10-year license for these things, like crazy. And then if you got a car, you got to pay to rent a space within one of the commercial or private car parking areas. So it becomes very, very expensive to have a car. And now a lot of people I've spoken to since have been like, but how about the Grabs and all of that sort of stuff? Grab being like Uber here in Australia. And I was like, yeah, they're technically rented off someone who has one of those licenses. Like, it's just weird. But these guys, they have an incredible metro system. Like, because again, they've started from scratch, they've been able to implement amazing town planning principles from day one. The metro system is crazy over there. And they were trialling, last time I was over there, they were trialling on-demand buses. I don't know if they're still going or what's happening there. But I remember last time it was like Uber. You could just go, hey, I'm ready to go into the city. I want to order a bus, and the bus will come back and change its route to come past you and pick you up. Like, they're really pushing the boundaries in terms of technology, and they're automated too, which is crazy. So yeah, they're really pushing the boundaries in terms of the services they're providing for people, which allows them to then to say, we're not going to provide any cars for people, you've just got to deal with it type thing. So I think the goal is to have everyone within 10 minutes of a metro station in their future planning. And they've actually planned to take this one step further. So apparently there's a site, I think it's like an ex-government army base or something like that within Singapore, that they're currently planning to convert to a new housing estate. Now, when you look at the plan for this housing estate, the first thing you notice is there's no cars. It's a carless city. So it's going to be their first carless city. I think she did say that they plan to have some sort of grab system that can come in and pick people up, but the basis is that you do not have a car if you live in that city. Like, credit to them. So that's the timeline textbook, the textbook, time warp, the parking. The final thing I want to talk about is the future. Now, she made this cursory, like, just passing comment to me about the fact that they had a new Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister was spruiking the fact that he was going to listen to the people going forward and take on some more community feedback going forward in terms of how the city evolves, all that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, there goes progress. Like, I'm not saying I don't believe community consultation has a place. I 100% believe community consultation has a place. But you have to acknowledge, and acknowledge is the best way to say it, the fact that here in Brisbane, the fact that we have listened so heavily to the community feedback, it has stalled and slowed the progress of development. And it is one of the big contributing factors towards the lack of available land and development opportunities here within Brisbane. Totally separate topic. Maybe I'll talk about that next week. But yeah, basically the fact that it's since 2015, the fact that since 2005, no, 15, I'm getting my dates wrong here. 2015, there's been a big shift here in Brisbane to focus on community consultation, listening to people, etc., etc. We have seen our city go in a very different direction from a town planning perspective. So I couldn't help but sit there and look at them and go, oh, come on, guys. Like, a massive reason why you've been able to achieve so much in such a short period of time is because you did take a very much like the government's going to take control, the government's going to sort this out type approach. So yeah, I can't help but think, okay, if Brisbane has seen this sort of change and shift as a result of that mentality, where's Singapore going to go in the future? Are they going to have the same rate of progress from this point forward? Interesting. Don't know. So yeah, I think that covers off everything I wanted to talk about in terms of those 3 points. It's, I guess, the final comment I want to make, or the moral of the story. I keep saying we can't look at this and go, we should copy it. I think Singapore is in a very, very different position to we are here in Brisbane. Number one, we've got, our population size isn't big enough to be able to fund these things. Like, we don't have the number of people living here. What are we, like 2 million people? I don't know, 1 million people. Whereas Singapore is 5 million people. A lot more population, therefore a lot more money to be able to spend on public infrastructure. We here in Brisbane in particular are very, very spread out, and that's largely due to the Undue Subdivision Act, which came in the late 1800s, which essentially specified that you needed a minimum block size of 405 square metres. So that kind of pushed the city outwards, and as a result we're very spread out. So again, it makes infrastructure very hard to implement because you've got larger costs to be able to spread it out, more running costs, all of that sort of stuff. We, like I suggested before, have very community consultative type approach to our planning system, which means the government doesn't step in and push things as hard. Like the character side of things, like we focus on Singapore, more to the point, focuses on protecting a very small, truly unique section of their housing stock. I think they're called black and white houses, very rare, very expensive. They focus on those, everything else can go. Whereas here in Brisbane in particular, it's more focused on everything pre-46 has got value. So, well, not everything, but a lot of stuff pre-46. And I'm the biggest character nut, so I don't like this. But it does, you have to acknowledge that it does restrict the amount of development opportunities out there because we take such a broad brush approach to trying to protect heritage or character and all of that sort of stuff. Like, there is so many differences between Singapore and Australia, which mean we can't necessarily roll out or implement some of the things that they've been successful with, but it still doesn't mean we can't sit there and learn from those experiences. So look at what they've been able to achieve and go, okay, what was the positive? How did they do that? How can we mold it or twist it slightly to suit our situation, our scenario? So yeah, I guess that's the parting message, is what can we learn from this experience? Anyway, I think that covers off everything I want to talk about today, as I always like to say. Until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site-specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number two, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all. Bye.